The Scuttlebutt is proud to welcome Millerstown Pick Apart, a self-service salvage yard where you can get parts you need for your car, truck, or van at very attractive prices because you do the work. Bring your own wrenches, hammers, screwdrivers, sockets, jacks, drills, or whatever you need, except for torches, to wrestle out the parts you need for the vehicles in the yard. Millerstown Pick Apart was created 17 years ago to provide reasonably priced solutions for auto parts needs. Millerstown is the perfect fit for those seeking discount auto parts to repair their own vehicles. Millerstown has a huge inventory of cars, which they purchase from individuals, towing companies, and auctions, and from its sister auto salvage recycling operation. For hours, directions, inventory, parts availability, and pricing, you can go to pickapartyard.com. That's PICAPARTYARD, pickapartyard.com, or call 724-224-4777. That's pickapartyard.com or call 724-224-4777.
I think most people who don't have military connection probably wouldn't even understand that maybe there is gradations of service. Just everybody, was in the military. And so that is a kind of uniform, monolithic kind of way of being. And that's absolutely not the case.
Welcome, everyone, to the Scuttlebutt. I'm your host, Sean Hall, Director of Programming with the Veterans Breakfast Club, whose mission is to create communities of listening around veterans and their stories to connect, educate, heal, and inspire. If you have been watching the Scuttlebutt from the beginning and not yet given us a review, please do so. We'd love to hear from you. You can send us a comment at sean@veteransbreakfastclub.org, or you can subscribe, ring the bell on YouTube. Any way that you'd like to engage with us, we would be happy to hear from you. And we also read comments and things on the podcast. So please do so if you get the chance. Joining us today, this is a very interesting guest and a very special guest, Ben Abel. I came across Ben when I was doing some research on task and purpose, and came across an article Ben wrote titled "You Either Went to War or You Didn't: How Deployments Divide the Veteran Community." I was very intrigued by this article, and I invited him to come on the podcast and sort of chat about what he wrote about. So I'm super excited to invite you onto the podcast. Thank you for coming, Ben, and sharing your time and your stories with us. But I'd love you to introduce yourself.
Yeah, hey, thanks first for inviting me. This was kind of out of the blue, and I really appreciate the opportunity to come and engage in the conversation with you. About me, I was born into an Army family. My dad was in a young soldier, and I grew up mainly at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. And when I was about 10, we moved to Germany, and we lived in probably the most idyllic town that I've ever been to in the world. I've been to a few towns in the world. On the German Alps, it was just the most wonderful place that anybody could have grown up. And so we lived there for about 6 years. Came back to the States, bounced around a little bit, El Paso, Texas for a while. Ended up graduating high school in Key West, Florida, and then moved back to Germany, kind of, bagged groceries at the commissary and drank some beer and kind of it was a little aimless. And then so just joined the Army after that. I spent 5 years in the Army as a psychological operations specialist, which is, we do propaganda, and we don't like to say we do propaganda. We do propaganda, communications effort, on battlefield communications effort, some more strategic stuff. And then after that, I did my 5 years. I got out, met my wife, and in the Army, we got married. And after that 5 years was up, got out, tried to go to school a little bit, didn't work out. We had some, family issues. And then I moved back to Fort Bragg and got a job as a public affairs officer for the Army for about 15 years. We moved to way upstate New York on the Canadian border at Fort Drum for a couple of years. And then wound back up at Fort Bragg, and then eventually my wife got a job out here towards the coast in North Carolina, and at the hospital here. And I went to grad school out here, and I've been teaching first and second year writing at East Carolina University for the past couple of years now. And so, we raising our 4 kids and get a dog and a nice little American life that we're living here now. And it's just, it's been a circuitous, but we got to a place that's really comfortable now. So I'm happy.
Awesome. Thank you for that history. And what years did you serve, those 5 years?
I was 95 till the end of 99.
95 at the end. Okay, so pretty much almost right before 9/11. You mentioned this in your article, that it was sort of like the peacetime.
Yeah, the comedian Greg Proops, he says the peace and prosperity scare of the late 90s,
Right.
when there was Bosnia, and of course, and Kosovo, and those things were happening, and those weren't great times for soldiers, because we were really deployed, and it was tough. But we also had, I was in an Army Special Operations unit, and we've always had, to this day, we have soldiers, Army Special Operations soldiers, who are deployed into 75, 80 countries around the world, basically every day of the year.
Mhm.
And so for us, it wasn't really that we were always going to be deployed somewhere. It may not be in combat, but that wasn't really necessarily our job all the time. But we always kind of had that moving around the world, being the global scouts is one of the words that they used a long time ago, to be kind of out there and have an American military presence in countries, and not be obtrusive, and not be kind of that ugly American presence.
Okay. And to dive into your family history a bit, so your dad, he saw, I'm guessing, a lot of combat. He was very much involved in the
Well,
infantry.
no, he wasn't in infantry. In the infantry, he was a special operations guy.
Okay.
He, had a couple different jobs within the special operations community. Ended up as a special forces soldier at a Green Beret, as in the 3rd Special Forces group. But before that, the jobs that he had took him to. He was on the hostage rescue mission into Iran, where we had the Desert One.
Yeah.
Eagle Claw mission, and then was on his helicopter, got shot down in Grenada during that invasion. And he'd been around the world, everywhere that you can imagine: South America, Central America, Africa, Middle East, Afghanistan, and like, if you name it, he probably has been there.
So growing up a military brat, is that what sort of got you like to join the military? Did you feel like that was your calling?
I have no idea.
Mhm.
I don't know. I assume that, I just figured that was the family business, and that's just what you do.
Yeah.
And similarly, along the same lines, when I left language school, I was in language school, and I didn't do too well in it, and they reassigned me to a different job. And Russian's a really hard language to learn.
By the way.
Yes, by the way. And so they reassigned me, and I had to go to jump school. And everybody, when I was leaving language school to go to jump school, they were like, "Oh man, you're going to jump school? I can't believe you're going to jump school." And I'm like, I just thought that that's what everybody did, just because of the nature of the environment that I grew up in. So I joining the military, I guess I just thought that's what everybody did. Maybe, I don't know.
Right. And you met your wife, who was also in the Army. Is that right?
Oh yeah, yeah. She was an interrogator. She was, and we were in the same unit, and she was in Colombia, and when I was in Venezuela, and then she came home, and I went to Colombia, and when we got out, she ended up going to Iraq in 2004.
Mm-hmm. And her family also served, back to her dad and her grandfather as well.
Yeah, her grandfather was in the Navy, was in the Pacific, and then her father went to Vietnam in 1970, 71-ish, as an infantryman. And so he had that experience, that kind of that really, really tough experience that I think a lot of our Vietnam veterans had.
Yeah.
And not necessarily just the on the ground stuff, but the coming home, and not necessarily coming back to a country that understood how to receive those soldiers, which I think was the challenge that they've had faced for 34 years now.
Oh, totally. And they've really changed up the country in a lot of ways for the better for veterans overall. Never again shall a group of veterans experience what they experience. It's so I talk about the family history because as we start to dive into your article a bit, because you bring it up so eloquently in the article, this idea of like, you come from a lot of history of military and conflict, and but you're a person who served and didn't see conflict, and that is what sort of prompted you to write this article. Is that right?
Yeah. Well, first, thank you about that writing, but that, I guess, kind of was the impetus. I was kind of looking around and kind of seeing that there were a lot of folks that were in my peer group, or people that I knew, spouses that I knew, who were having experiences of a generations long having spent an entire military career in and out of Iraq and Afghanistan, and I just didn't share that. And I didn't I know what it's like, but I don't know what it is, and I think there's a difference there. What I
Well, let me interrupt you real quick, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but you say you know what it's like, but you don't know what it is, and I'm not a veteran. Our audience knows that well. For a civilian, like I see it in the movies, or I hear the stories from veterans, so I don't know what it like or what it is. So this feels like it's one more step further. It's like you know what it likes, but you don't know what it is. Like, can you sort of dive into that a little bit?
Yeah, for sure. I've been thinking about this a lot before we spoke, and I keep thinking of it like a gradient, like when you go from like a white to a black, all the shades of gray in between. And I think the vast majority of the American public, I mean, just statistically, of course, don't have any experience. But then there are some who do. We have military families, extended military families, who start to kind of have a little bit of an understanding. And then I probably am a little closer to the other spectrum, but I still don't know what it's like to be in that environment where you could have a mortar land on you at any time, or you could be shot at any time. I mean, we were in Venezuela and Colombia. It was danger. There were dangers that were there.
Mm-hmm.
The drug cartels were not friendly to having American soldiers down there trying to keep those drugs from moving up. They have a financial stake in that. But I didn't ever feel really at risk. I didn't feel like there was an immediate threat, like most of our folks in Iraq and Afghanistan had that immediate threat at all times. Even if you were stuck on a forward operating base somewhere, mortars are indiscriminate and they don't really care whether you're out, an infantryman or a special operations soldier or something. They don't really care. But I just never had that experience, and it's not eating at me, but it just became something that became quite obvious to me that I didn't share that same experience with people.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that there's a gulf that I never would be able to get across. Mm-hmm. I know what it's like to carry a really heavy rucksack. I know what it's like to jump out of an airplane at 2 a.m. I know what it's like to do lots of really hard soldier things, but I don't know what that last step across a very, very deep chasm is. And I guess that was my realization.
Was there a piece of you that wanted to see that, or still wants to see combat?
I don't know. I don't know anybody who doesn't want to do their job and to be kind of validated in that they are good at their job, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody wants to know that they're good at their job. What I know now, I guess I've kind of come to peace with the fact that I don't really want that for anyone. Mm. I don't want anyone to have to be in that position of having to decide whether or not to take another person's life. I don't know that war makes anything better at this point, and so I don't think that. I would like to know that I could do my job well, but I don't know that I want to have to go to the extremes that I would have to go to in order to prove that at this point.
Do you think having a family sort of changed your mindset in that way?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it probably has, but I don't know. That's hard. You can't do a randomized controlled trial on your life, but
right.
I assume it. Of course, it has to have something to do with it, but I probably would think that no matter what at this point in my life, whether I have kids or not. Right. I don't know that I don't see the value in it. I don't see the value anymore in conflict like this.
What feelings do you think sort of bubble up whenever you think about your service and not seeing combat? You mentioned a couple different things, maybe like red herrings, it seems in the article, of like regret or cowardice, or you say belligerent ennui, which I'd love for you to sort of define for me a bit. You know, what tends to come up?
I don't know. At this point, I'm pretty much at peace with it, but it's still that kind of that sense that what could have been, or would I have been part of a club that not necessarily a club that I want to be a part of, but one that I was in, but I never really got the full the full acceptance from. But it's kind of weird because I did get a lot of really positive response from people who were like, hey, no, you did your part. Following the publication of this article, and I don't feel like I've necessarily missed out on anything, but there is just that gap of being able to understand other folks who have been in those combat situations or have been in those deployments, those really dangerous times. I just think that there's something that I don't understand about it.
Mhm.
And
Is your father still with us?
yes. Yeah.
And have you talked to him about this idea? I would wonder how, his level of service and sort of what you went through when you enlisted, like how that the difference in that and sort of what his take is on it.
It's kind of tough right now between us, but it's never been, we never, really been kind of sherry about that. And I think maybe he's got some reservations that don't allow him to want to explore that, maybe.
Yeah.
Which is fine. My father-in-law, I think, has done a lot of work on trying to understand his experience and how that's impacted him, and I can see some glimmers of that through some of the comments that he makes and some of those the interactions that we have, but I haven't really, and it's almost that question, there's always that question that there are just questions you don't ask, because I don't want to be the one to have to rip the Band-Aid off of, to get the answer that I need. And it's not for me to ask for them to open themselves in that way if they're not willing to do it.
That's an interesting point that sort of segues into my next question. This sort of like, do you feel that there's sort of like a mental health consequence to not seeing combat, but also being a veteran?
I don't know that, like, a mental health consequence for no, I mean, I don't think it's the same thing. I mean, is there a mental health consequence for being an emergency department doctor or nurse? I mean, I don't think I share the trauma that they experience, or or a cop or a firefighter who has to deal with incredible tragedy every single day. I don't share that same thing, and I know that I don't share that same trauma that I don't know. Did you recently? There was Jim Laporta, is a reporter for the Associated Press. He's a former Marine infantryman. He had a really stunning piece yesterday, kind of a reflection about having watched a video of a young child be killed, and it was I can't share that. I wasn't there. I wasn't a Marine infantryman, and so his experience, his lived experience, is going to bring him a certain trauma that I know that I don't have, and so I don't think I can have that.
And that's a really great point of and that's where I think you get into the veteran space, and I can see how there would be a divide in necessarily just like the language, the understanding. I can only imagine, like, showing up at the VA, and there's just like a little bit of a different language between you and maybe someone who has seen combat. And I'm trying to understand that as a civilian, because my view of it as a civilian would be that all veterans sort of sit within this space, that they all speak the same language. And is there that divide? Is it as apparent as it seems?
No, I don't. I think you're going to take me down, a tangent.
That's okay. That's what the podcast is for.
You're going to take me down a tangent about civil military divide as it stands, in general. And I think probably there is, I think most people who don't have military connection probably wouldn't even understand that maybe there is gradations of service. Just everybody, was in the military. And so that is a kind of uniform, monolithic kind of way of being. And that's absolutely not the case. I mean, we have people from every walk of life and every type of experience, life experience, that brings you to this place. And this place of being in military service. And so if you were to see two veterans, there may be a million things that are very similar, and a lot of, I'm not saying that there's this gulf of difference between me and every other veteran that's been out there, but I think there is just that one, that sliver, and I think it's a very sharp sliver of that kind of defines the difference between somebody who has and has not been in combat. It's hard to say, but just because there is such that divide, that civil military divide, and it's very prominent, I think.
I like that you could get on a soapbox about this, because we've been on it for quite a while with the Scuttlebutt. One of the reasons we exist is to try to bridge that divide. So it's a great opportunity now to sort of hear more about that in this conversation. What does it mean to you? And a follow-up question on that is the idea of, you're bringing your kids up, you're a military family. How do you teach them about the military civilian divide if there's conversation or opportunities to do that?
Well, I mean, we definitely talk about, we watch the news with kids at night, and we talk to them about, things that we see that are happening in Afghanistan right now.
Yeah.
When we're down at the beach here, in North Carolina, we have, a huge Marine presence. And so there are always, Marine jets flying over our house. We're down at the beach. They have the Ospreys are flying, and the guys are, just driving around up and down the beach, checking out the girls in bikinis, I guess. I don't know. So
they're military guys. They probably.
Yeah, I know. But, or the young ladies doing, checking out the guys. I don't know, whatever. But, whatever it may be, we don't shy away from talking with our kids about that, because while I don't want them necessarily to feel that they have any kind of need to go and have, uniform service, I don't want that to be something that's foreign to them, or to not, to have some kind of framework within which to understand that that's a way of being, and that we have responsibility as citizens to be part of the decisions that are made, our national decisions that our men and women in uniform have to enact in scary places sometimes.
Totally. We always ask this question, a part of our VBC events, is if they came to you and said, hey, I want to enlist in the Air Force, Army, Marines, how would you feel about that?
I tell them to go in the Coast Guard. I mean, you're at the beach, right? Where's the Coast Guard not at the beach? And then I get to come and visit, but
unless they're like taking over submarines or something like.
Yeah. I would want them to do what they feel that they need to do. And if that meant, going and doing the hardest thing, if that's what they really needed to do, then that's what they need to do. I would prefer them not to find themselves in a direct line unit. I just know that that's a very scary place to be, and I wouldn't want them for them. But if that's what they need to do, then that's what they need to do. And I would never tell any of my kids to not do what they needed to do.
It's a very interesting thing, because if you have this feeling of like I didn't get a chance to see combat, but not wishing that for your kids as well, like, no, you don't want to see this, and I didn't see it, but I was enlisted. How do you reconcile those sort of very different feelings?
I'm
asking a lot of really in-depth questions here on the Scuttlebutt.
No, it's fine. It's fine.
Yeah.
I can't give anyone else the experience that I've had. You can't give secondhand experiences, and I don't have those firsthand experiences. But I know what it was like to be in the gym at Fort Drum, New York, and to watch a young man who had been burned incredibly bad, burns to the point that he was, there was really no way that he was going to make it off the battlefield. He made it to Brooke Army Medical Center in San Antonio, and was doing fairly well. He said that he was going to be at Fort Drum for the return, his unit's return. The doctor said, if you get on a plane, you're going to die on the plane. You can't, your body can't handle it. And he said, I don't care, I'm going to be there. And so, I had to stand there and be a part of this and experience that with this young man. And it was, it was enough to pound you into the ground. It was terrible. And I've sat in the living rooms with, families who have lost their children, and, right as they were told, because, the media presence, my job was to, to help the family deal with, the crush of media, particularly early, in Iraq and Afghanistan, when they just got overwhelmed. And, those are, I had in my own family, my brother-in-law died in a training accident, and we were there, with his family, and it was horrible. And I can't explain that to, my kids or somebody who hasn't had that experience. But I can tell you that, even those secondhand experiences, even, just watching vicariously through other people's lives, it's damaging in a way that I don't think can be expressed by the people who have been damaged. I don't think it can properly be expressed. Right. And I don't want that for anybody.
This was your work as a public affairs officer, a PAO.
Yeah, I did that for about 15 years. I was a civilian, so I had, I didn't really get the opportunity to go overseas as part of that job, but we were still back in the States and had a lot of interaction with what was going on over there, and then helping the families, I think, was a large part of it.
Was there something that was a desire that you wanted to be a PAO? Like, is there something that drove you to do that? This seems very difficult work.
Well, it's not all that hard. It's busy. It can be emotionally, the PAO gets kind of ragged on a lot, and kind of put down a lot, but not many soldiers or any service members. So I go to soldier, but any service members generally are not. They'd rather run into a firefight than deal with a reporter. And so our job was to kind of bridge that gap for them, and help them explain that it's the responsibility of the government to be accountable to the people that we serve, and part of that is being accountable through the press and through the media. And so that was a large part of our job. And so there was some really emotional, really hard things that we had to deal with. There was a time in the surges in Iraq in between 2005 and 2008. I mean, every single night at 2 a.m, I get a phone call. Okay, we lost another couple of kids. We lost another couple of Joes. We had a helicopter go down with 16. We had and I wasn't there, but after a while, that just, each unit might have one or two or three, but I had one every single day. We had to deal with the families and try to express to the American people who these young women and men were. And it was, it does get a little burdensome at times. I know that sounds awfully whatever, but it was so tough, little whiny little old me. But I don't think anybody gets off free if you're associated with the war. I don't think anybody gets off free.
No, and you're right. And that's not an easy position to be in, to relay that message or that information to a family. And we've had different conversations on the Scuttlebutt about with veterans who said, or military families that said, I knew they were deployed. I knew there was the chance that they wouldn't come back, but I never thought about it. I never let my mind go to that. So even they may be quote unquote mentally prepared for something that is that, but when it does happen, you're not, no way. And to be the person that relays that information, no, I don't envy that at all. So working with the families in that way, though, had to be in some way, you're there to comfort them as well. Is that right?
Yeah. And to comfort them. I mean, my job wasn't necessarily to comfort them, but it was definitely there to protect them as best they could. And also, something that is really important for a lot of the families is to represent their service member, their husband, wife, son, daughter, brother, sister, to show who that person was, right? To humanize that person. It's not just a name, and so we went out of our way to try to help them out with that as best we could.
How did you do that? I mean, as a writer, and you're a very talented writer, how did you do that through your writing to be able to humanize them?
We did as best we could. It became very stock and formulaic. Honestly, I could write a casualty news release in about 10 minutes, and that probably was one of the things that really made me start to question what I was doing in there, because it had become such a formula. Like I could tell you, I look at a piece of paper, look at their records, their enlistment records, and I could tell you everything about them that the press wanted to know. But I couldn't tell you who they were. I couldn't tell you what their dog's name was, and I couldn't tell you where they went to school. And so that our job then was really to try to figure out how to get that information or find a way for the reporters to get the information so that they could humanize and to fully color in that person's life, so they weren't just another during the surge, especially in Iraq and Afghanistan, the surges, it just became another 5 soldiers were killed today, another 10 soldiers were killed today. And who are those people? And that, we tried our best to help make sure that the American people knew who they were. But I think a lot of times it got lost, unfortunately.
Is that the lessons for, I bring it up, a civilian like myself, is in also attempting to bridge this divide, it's understanding the human aspect of this, that though we may hear the numbers, even recently 13 service members were killed in the terrorist attack at Kabul airport during the evacuation. Hearing the names of these soldiers and understanding a little of who they are or were, it is part of that, is part of our responsibility as civilians.
Yeah, I think that is part of it, but I'll get on a soapbox a little bit. I think that that our culture has been structured over the past 50 years or so to make it so that you as a non-military, you're certainly different than most folks who are non-military family, but for the majority of people who don't have any kind of connection to the military, we in those communities have been incentivized to not care. We have been disincentivized to care, right? And so over the past 50 years, and so I think a lot of that started with the end of the draft, right, like 1975, right? And then so when you no longer have any skin in the game, it's no longer your family. That's a disincentivized position to be in. And then also when we began the all voluntary force, we started to incentivize families who were kind of in this military caste system, where it became the culture of that family to be in there. And so I think that even further separated it. But I don't think that the defense industry really wants people to care, to be honest. And that's kind of me getting a little, I think that if people cared, then it might if people did pay attention and care to what was happening in Iraq and Afghanistan over the past 20 years, that might have impacted the way that our military had been deployed. And I think that that's not financially sound for certain people within our society. So I think keeping people disinterested in what's happening in military communities is probably in the best interest of a lot of people who are making a lot of money.
Yeah, it's
that's a really hard hurdle to try to get over, because these are people who are have significant control over large swaths of communication, over voting, and over all kinds of aspects of our society that disincentivize people into really kind of caring about what's happening with our soldiers and sailors, airmen, and Marines, and the coasties too.
And how I guess and the Space Force now too.
Hey, I forgot about them.
Yeah. How do you see that shifting? How do we get people to care more? It's a question we ask a lot. There's really no, education is one aspect, and it's like, how do you educate? Or I had a really great conversation recently on the Scuttlebutt with JROTC, and saying, like, should we make JROTC mandatory? You don't have to join afterwards, but you get this idea of service. You get an understanding of military culture. You have there are different positives to being a part of the JROTC without the end result of potentially being in a combat zone, bringing this sort of full circle. Do you see a way out of this?
I don't know. I don't know. One of the ideas that I think has a lot of merit is a national service, and I don't think that necessarily means national military service, and I don't think that means like conscription. Everybody has to do their 2 years, like you have in a lot of Europe,
or modern, Israel, right?
Western democracies, which I think there's some value in, maybe some value in that. When I was after high school, I was living in Germany, and I was out having a couple beers with this guy, and I was talking to this German guy who drove an ambulance, and he said, I told him that I wasn't going to be in the military. I was a pacifist. I didn't want to do it. And so they said, okay, well, you can drive an ambulance for your national service for 2 years. And he said, okay, that's what I'll do. And that's what he was doing for his national service. So I think that we've lost society. We've lost a kind of a sense of responsibility. Everybody wants their rights, but they don't want their responsibility, right? And those two things go hand in hand, and you can't have one without the other. And I think there's a responsibility, not necessarily just like in national service or something, but being responsible for the service. If you look at Congress right now, I think you see that, it's a clown show, really. We don't have, the majority of people in Congress aren't serious about service, about public service. And I think that trickles down. Like if we're voting people into Congress, into elected positions of leadership who aren't serious, then what does that say about our society? Are we serious about governing ourselves and being responsible to one another? And I just don't see that.
Mm-hmm.
I honestly, I don't know. I don't know what the answer is. Maybe it's national service of some kind that kind of brings us and binds us back together and tries to say that, hey, you know what? We're more than our differences. We're all so much better than what we think that we can be.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know. Maybe national service would do that, but I don't know. If you can come up with a better answer, I'd like to hear.
I'll give it some thought.
Please do.
Back to your article,
Sure.
we had mentioned that sort of like there's a lot of different things to unpack in there. Do you think there's going to be a part 2 to the article where you sort of dive into maybe the father-son relationship, or dive into more of your time as a PAO and sort of unpack some of those feelings that sort of happened during those points in your life?
Well, I mean, I've got a lot of writing that I've done. I wrote a novel that no literary agent apparently wants to read. That kind of gets into how what it's like for somebody who's been in the military who comes back and tries to reintegrate themselves back into a non-military community, how that works and how that could work. Just in this one instance, this one idea that came to me. And so, I've tried to do that, but not very popular. I don't think really people are really altogether interested in exploring this. If you see that, there's a lot of outrage after the situation that happened in Afghanistan lately, the withdrawal from Afghanistan. Lots of people were really mad about it, but they weren't really mad about it in the preceding 10 years when we could have voted, done some voting in Congress to actually arrest some of maybe these poor decisions that were being made. Mm-hmm. And so, am I going to write more about it? I don't know. Probably. I don't know that it necessarily will be in this kind of same venue or format. I don't think I would, necessarily. Maybe familiar relationships again. Maybe in a different way. Maybe in a fictionalized way might be an easier way to do it. Mm-hmm. Kind of bumping up against some challenges within the family relationships, but that's okay.
Right. Yeah. I know those all too well in my own family. So
yeah, I think we all do.
Yeah, exactly. And what brought you to writing? Had you always been interested in it? Is that something that has sort of stuck with you? Where did you say, like, this is the path I want to take out of my service?
This is just something that I try to do on the side a little bit. I teach first and second year composition. So writing is kind of my day job. If that's, the academic writing is different than this kind of maybe journalism or memoir. I don't know what you would call it. Fiction writing is a little bit different. I don't know. I like to run a lot. And so things just come to me and I try to write them down when I get back. And, it just, I don't know. I think we open ourselves up. I don't know if you know the author, Liz Gilbert. She wrote the Eat, Pray, Love. But she's got a book about writing called Big Magic, and it talks about it's really a kind of much more of a spiritual kind of thing. And it talks about being open to creativity and inspiration. And I don't know, so I kind of follow along what she says, that if you're willing to open yourself up and let the inspiration and the big magic come to you, then if you just listen to it, it'll tell you what to do. So mm-hmm. That's just kind of what I try to do. I don't know if I'm very good at it, but I try. Well, it works. I like it. I enjoy it, so that's okay.
Well, that's all that needs is yourself. But there is that thing about the need to write, and we've talked a lot on the Scuttlebutt about veterans finding purpose after service. Obviously with the suicide numbers and different things that are in the headlines that we all know about. But I've found that veterans tend to be entrepreneurial, or they find a passion or a desire after service that sort of like they throw themselves into fully. There's a very interesting personality that I've found over the last couple of years talking to veterans about when they got out, this idea of like, I'm going to serve my country and I'm going to do it 110%. And then I come back and I'm going to throw myself 110 or 150% into something else. Is there something in your family dynamic in your home that you try to instill that, like everybody's on the same page, we're moving ahead?
With my family, my wife and kids, we're, fairly motivated folks. I think, I don't want to, that sounds a little pretentious, but I think we just, try to jump into the things that we like to do and do them. Right. Mm-hmm. And I get what you're saying about veterans being kind of, a lot motivated. There's a lot of lazy folks too. So, I don't want you to think that like, that there's some kind of monolithic, there's a lot of dirtbags in the veteran community too.
Yeah.
So, but yeah, I think that there maybe is a bit of the culture within the military is to be accountable to yourself, and to not waste time. I mean, of course, there's lots of sitting around wasting time, but to not to look for something to do to make things better, to not wait around to be told to do something that is going to make life better for you or for somebody else. So I think that's part of it. Entrepreneurial spirit, maybe, is there a little bit? I get what you're saying.
Yeah, totally. Well, Ben, this has been a really interesting and introspective conversation. I've learned a lot in a very short time here. I really appreciate it. And what I'd love to do is we're going to make sure to post the article for our audience so that they can click on it and read through this. If they have questions or thoughts, I'd love for them to reach out to me. And I can forward them on to you if you would like.
Yeah, please.
And as a side note, can you tell me some of the comments that you've received on the article?
Yeah, a lot of it's been, very complimentary, and, thanks for your service, and, trying to kind of ease that bridge that divide a little bit, which is understandable. And I've seen a lot of, Facebook and, comments and stuff, which is fine. I've got a couple of emails from people who are, Cold War era service members who were in Germany instead of Korea, or in, Germany instead of Vietnam, or whatever it was. And they kind of share this kind of a same sense of not, of being a little bit different, right? Not like second class citizen within the veteran community, but just not having the same entree into that experience, that level of experience. I did get a couple of weeks ago, I think Task and Purpose or one of the online services news organizations had reposted the article, and I got another flood of comments back, and one of them was heartbreaking. There was a young Marine, a Marine veteran who had was expressing to me that he had been in combat, and he had a number of people within his family and his generation who had been in the Marines or in the Air Force, and had all been in combat, and they kind of all shared very similar experiences. But he had quite recently, his brother had taken the Marine's brother had taken the Marine's son somewhere in the car. They had gotten into a car accident, and the child died, and so what he kind of really started to parallel for me, and I, it was tear jerking, really. He said, the parallel, the parallels that you're making here are very similar, to the sense that I know now what it's like to have lost a child, and that's a very small community of people, especially on his age group, who have lost children in a traumatic way like this. And he said, but there's even another kind of gulf that's between me and my brother now, because we share these completely different experiences with the same occurrence, and we'll never be able to understand one another in this way. And it really struck me really hard that we all have experiences, and I don't know what it's like to lose a mother to cancer at a young age, or to we're right before September 11th. I don't know what it's like to have been, involved in, have family that were in the towers or something like that. And so, we do have this kind of, this almost inconsequential military divide that I spoke about in this article, is mirrored in so many different ways in everyone's lives. That I think, it's just human experience is really what it comes down to. It's just, in this case, human experience between those in uniform.
Even though over the course of this short conversation, you seem to strike me, and please correct me if I'm wrong, you seem to strike me as somebody who, even in the response of the Marine, is you want to peer into that abyss. Like, you want to know what that other side is. though though not able to get there, there's a barrier there because of life experience or whatnot. Do you think there's like an empathetic piece of that, like being able to empathize with what that other side is experiencing and share in a language that is foreign to you?
I would hope that we could at least try to do that. I mean, I guess I try to do that as best I can. Maybe that's part of what we were talking about earlier about that missing piece of not being able to understand one another, or this broad gulf between civilian and military communities, is not having the groundwork to be able to empathize. I guess maybe in this situation with this Marine, I can empathize because I do have kids too, and so that allows, and as you would have the same experience that, if this were to somehow be gone. I mean, how many times have you thought about what would happen if? What would happen if? And you don't want to think that, and so. I think that empathy is present because I do have that experience. But if we talk about the civilian and military divide, I think that it's maybe a different kind of gulf, but there isn't that kind of that common ground from which we can begin to acknowledge that empathetic impulse. Maybe, I don't know. That sounds like a bunch of garbage.
It does, but also it kind of sounds like the answer. Like the empathy of civilians, if you can be empathetic towards what the other side is experiencing, maybe there's an understanding there that you can start to get to, as opposed to the shut down, you're not speaking my language, I don't want to hear it, you're blocked on Facebook,
Yeah, I certainly hope maybe that might be part of the answer at least.
Okay, well, if anything, we've bubbled something up to the surface here on the podcast.
We solved the whole thing.
We did. We're done. Wipe your hands. Go back to bed. Get up tomorrow. Find another new world problem we have to solve.
All right, done.
Well, Ben, again, it's been an absolute pleasure and an honor. I welcome you onto our VBC events at any time you'd like to join us and chat and say hi. We also have a VBC magazine that we put out quarterly. That's not to, pump the magazine, but I'd love for you to be a guest writer on the magazine if you'd like, and to bring an article to us. We would love to share it in that to our audience. I hope that you take a moment to read Ben's article and share your thoughts and comments with us. Also, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, and ring the bell on YouTube. We're always eager and would love to hear from you. Thank you all. Thank you, Ben, for joining us, and we'll see you all in the next episode of the Scuttlebutt. I want to thank Millerstown Pick Apart for their generous support and sponsorship of this program. For Millerstown's hours, direction, inventory, and pricing, go to pickapartyard.com. That's PICAPARTYARD.com. Thank you so much, Millerstown, and we'll see you on the next Scuttlebutt.